and a very warm good evening to everyone. At least I hope it's warm. It was terrible weather earlier today, and now it seems to have, brightened up. Anyway, welcome back to Thursday night virtual TechnoClub. We had a little break previously for the last 2 weeks, just whilst the summer of STEM was going on. But now we are back. And I thought we'd come back today with a bit of a bang and do a little bit of audio processing. And the website we're going to use for that today is editor.p5js.org. Let me copy that across. And when you load it up, you should see that we've got code on the left, and in particular this is a little bit of JavaScript, and a preview on the right. Let's just neaten up this editor to make it a little bit easier for us to move around. When I say easier, I mean if we go to the settings cog, I'm going to put it into dark mode, just because that makes me feel like a proper programmer. It's not necessary. It just, it helps sell the look. And yeah, you can do all this extra settings and such the like. So, what do I mean by audio processing? Well, I'm sure there are some of you who might have used a piece of software called Audacity. Now, Audacity is a very popular piece of software. There's things like Audition. It's all software for editing sound. And we're going to do a little bit of that ourselves, but we're going to program it. So, what we're going to do is we're going to get this program on the left to record our voice input from a microphone and output it, but do some interesting effects on it. So, what am I going to do first? Well, I'm going to get rid of this draw function here. So I should mention that P5 is the new name for processing. We've already covered processing in this TechnoClub. We've looked at when we did a painting app. We used processing for that, but that time we were using processing in Python. Now we're using processing in JavaScript. So yeah, p5js.org. We don't need the draw function because we're not doing anything with graphics today, so I'm going to delete that. Instead, we are just focused on sound. I'm going to keep this create canvas here because when I press play, it creates a nice canvas for us. We can't see it because it has no color. So underneath create canvas, I'm going to give it some color. I'm going to say background, open curly bracket, open normal bracket. And now I need to give it an RGB value, a red, green, blue value. And basically that's 3 numbers, 0 to 255. And it shows how much red there is, how much green there is, how much blue there is. So if I wanted, let's say, a kind of pale blue, well, that's going to be a lot of red because it's a pale blue. It's going to be close to white. So we want a lot of red, so 200. A lot of green, another 200. But all the maximum possible amount of blue. So 255. And I finish that off with a rounded bracket. And this is JavaScript, and unlike Python, JavaScript likes to end its commands with a semicolon. And if your code isn't working, it's likely because you've forgotten a semicolon. So I've just stuck that at the end. When I click play now, it creates a nice pale blue canvas for me. Of course, I can change that color. If I wanted it to be all red, I could change that to 255, that one to 0, that one to 0, And there we are, very ugly all red. If I wanted it slightly, let's do 250. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Just pick a color, whatever you like. We're not really bothered about the color. This is just somewhere to put all the buttons that we're going to be using. So I'm going to stick at this kind of boring grey light blue, as I always do. This is going to be a text app. Sorry, a sound app. So let's prompt the user to do something. So we want to show a little bit of text on screen. So I can do that by having the text command, open bracket, and in speech marks, I can tell it what text. So click record to record your voice. End speech mark. And inside this command, we also need to give it a position. It needs to know where it's going to go. So this is going to be an XY coordinate. So let's say 20. So it should be around about the top left-hand corner. I end it with a bracket. And of course, end it with a semicolon. And when I click play again, there we are. I got a little bit of text up the top there just telling us what to do. You might not even be able to make that out on my screen, but it's definitely there. Okay. So, that's it for now. We've got the basis where we can start building all of our extras on. But to do that, we need to tell JavaScript what extras are we going to use. Well, we're definitely going to use the microphone, but we also need to record, so we're going to need a recorder. We need somewhere to store that recording, so we're going to need a sound file. And the way to get these is if you go to the very top of the file on line 1 before the function setup. I'm just going to press enter a couple of times to give you some breathing space. And at the very, very top of the code, I'm going to tell JavaScript that I want 3 things. So I want to say let, which is short for let me have. Let, what do I want? Well, I want the microphone. So mic, comma, recorder, because I also want the recorder, comma, sound file, because I want that too. And because this is a command, end it with a semicolon. So all this line is basically saying is let me have the microphone, let me have a recorder, and let me have a sound file. Notice that sound file has a lowercase s and a capital F. And it's all one word. And yeah, that's more or less it for telling it what we want. But we need to tell it, what do these things mean? We need to tell it that a microphone is actually a microphone, and a recorder is actually a recorder, and a sound file is actually a sound file. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep on using our setup function. Our setup function is just for, what do we do when we first start the app? We're going to carry on writing inside it. So underneath where we've got our text, but before the closing curly bracket, I'm going to give myself a little bit more space, and we're going to tell it that the microphone is a microphone. So mic equals, and it's a new microphone, so we're going to type in new. So we're making sure that we're using a new one and not reusing some old one. P5, which is the name of the library, dot audio with a capital A, in with a capital I, open bracket, close bracket, and there's that's the end of the command, so semicolon. Mic equals new p5 dot audio in, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. And all that does is a little piece of code that's telling JavaScript that mic is now an audio in object. And it's an audio in object that's taken from the P5 library. What a palaver. Either way, it's a mess. And if you think that's a mess, then just wait till you see the rest. It's not so bad. It's only a small app today. So now we have the microphone. We need to switch it on. And we can do that quite simply by going mic dot start, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. And all that's going to do is start the microphone. And we can test whether this works. If I press play, if I have gotten everything right so far, it should ask me, if you're using Chrome or Firefox or Safari, your browser will usually have a little pop-up that says the website would like to access your microphone, and you can allow or not allow. And this is just for extra security, but we can allow it. We can also remember this decision, so it won't keep on annoying me with this pop-up. So allow the use of my microphone. So now the website's using my microphone, but it's not doing anything with it. We haven't told it to do anything with it. So I'm just going to click stop for now. Now, if that comes up with an error, it's possible that your microphone is not compatible with the website. It should be, but we're working with hardware here, and hardware talking to software, it's always notoriously a little bit dodgy whether or not it works. But if it doesn't work, you could always try it out on another computer or so on, or just follow along for a little bit of practice with programming. So we've got the microphone. Now we need to set up the recorder, and that's done in a very similar style. So we go recorder. What is the recorder? Well, the recorder equals a new, and we're going to take an object from the P5 library, so P5, telling it which library we're using, dot, and now we're going to tell it which object we're going to use. We're going to use the sound recorder, so sound, with a capital S, recorder, with a capital R. And it's all one word, and as per usual, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. I should get a tattoo of that because I say those words far too many times. Semicolon, 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 open bracket, open curly bracket, open square bracket, close curly bracket, and so on. Yeah, that's the life of a programmer. You'll get sick of all these brackets. Anyway, so we've now, with this line, recorder equals new p5.soundRecorder, we've now created a recorder object. And we need to tell the recorder that it's going to use the mic as an input. So recorder dot set input. Notice in set input it uses a capital I. And I'm going to open a bracket, and I'm going to tell it what input it's going to use. Well, it's going to use the mic. So open bracket, and close bracket, and a semicolon. Recorder.setInput mic. Just one more thing to go. We're going to get it to store it in a sound file. And that's just so it can, well, remember. We need to store our recording that we make of our voice somewhere. And we're going to store it in sound file. And we need to tell sound file that it's a sound file. This is called object-oriented programming, and yeah, a lot of it is just telling things to be the things that you want them to be. Sound file, with a capital F, equals new p5 dot sound file, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. So we're telling sound file that it's a new sound file object taken from the p5 library. And with those 5 lines, we're pretty much good to go for the next bit, which is where we actually do the recording. And to do the recording, I'm going to create some functions that make it a little bit easier for me to control, to move around, and I could just call these functions wherever I want. So notice I'm now doing this completely underneath and outside of setup. So setup ends with this curly bracket. I'm going to go outside the curly bracket, and I'm going to create a new function. And this is going to be the function that starts the recording for us. So function, very imaginative declaration there. Function, I need to give it a name. What should I call it? Well, this is the function that's going to start the recording, so I'm going to call it function start record, because I'm boring. And this is a function, so no semicolon at the end at all. But we do have the open bracket and the close bracket. But we also need to sort of designate the space that belongs to start record. So in the same line where I've declared it, I'm going to create a open curly bracket, and this shows us the start of start record. Now I'm going to press enter a couple of times, and then I'm going to have a close curly bracket. And basically I said to JavaScript, everything between this curly bracket and this curly bracket belongs to start record, and it will only run when start record is executed. And this is where I can put my code to start the recording. So I could say recorder, because that's our recording object, dot, and what's our recorder going to do? Well, it's going to record. So recorder.record. But it needs to know where to dump that data. It needs to dump the data in sound files. So open bracket. And we've already got a sound file, so sound file with a capital F, close bracket. And because we're back to commands, of course, it ends with a semicolon. So recorder.record sound file. Right. Now we move on to stop record. I'll give you a second to think about what stop record might be. It's pretty obvious. That's one of the reasons I like this processing library so much, because it's very straightforward and no nonsense. It doesn't mess you around. So we're going to create a function that stops recording. So I'm going to call it function stop record. I know, imaginative name. I'm branching out. function stop record, and we need to give it some space, so I'm going to start that space with the curly bracket, press enter a couple of times, and I'm going to close it with another curly bracket. And inside this function is where I'm going to stop the recording. And very imaginatively, it is recorder dot stop, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. Yep, just as simple as that, recorder dot stop. Nice and simple, quite boring, but you know, simple is good. So we're going to create one more function before we actually get to, record our voice. And this is the most important function. This function is actually going to play the sound back to us. And it's going to have a very clever, well thought out name. That's going to be a function. And as you can already guess, it's going to be called play record. Open bracket, close bracket, open curly bracket, close curly bracket. Now, put your brains together to think about what on earth processing might have decided to be the command to play the sound file. It's, it's a real tough guess. It's sound file dot play. No nonsense, just sound file dot play. So we've got everything in place to start recording and playing back. But wait, we haven't. How can we? If I press play, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. It needs user input. It needs some buttons. It needs a button that says start recording, a button that says stop recording, and a button that says play recording. So that's what we're going to create next. Now these go inside our setup function. So if I go to my setup function and I go to the last line of it, and inside this curly bracket I'm going to give myself some space by pressing enter, and this is where we create our buttons, and the buttons need to have a name. So let's create a button that starts the recording. I'm going to call it start button. Now, start button doesn't do anything. It doesn't exist at the moment. I need to tell JavaScript that it is a button. So I say start button equals create button. Notice that create button has a capital B. And if you type it right, it should be bold. That being said, it's not bold on my other PC. Anyway, start button equals create button, and create button is a function that creates a button, and you can actually put text in that button if you do an open bracket, a speech mark, and the text you want it to be. So I'm going to say this is going to say start recording. And I'm going to make sure that I finish that off with a closing speech mark, a closing bracket, and a closing semicolon. And if I click play, we can see down here we've now got a start recording button. And I can click it as much as I want, but it doesn't do anything. So that's what we're going to do... actually, let's move this button up to be somewhere a little bit more sensible. So on the next line, I'm going to say start button. And I'm going to reposition it. I'm going to say start button dot position. And in an open and close bracket, I'm going to give it an XY coordinate. So if our text that we wrote was over at position 2020, I want this button to be a bit lower. So I'm going to give it position 2040. And remember, I'm going to finish that line with a semicolon. And if I do that right, there we are. It's got a more sensible location up there at the top. So, before doing the other buttons, I should probably tell JavaScript what is this button going to do. Because you saw me clicking away at it, it wasn't doing nout. So to fix that, I'm going to say start button, and I'm going to set its mouse pressed property to point towards a function. And what I mean by that is I'm going to tell it that when the mouse is pressed on this button, it should run a function that I have written. So start button dot mouse pressed, if I could spell, pressed with a capital P, open bracket, and I need to put in here the name of the function I want it to run. And it's going to run start record, and then finish that with a semicolon. So let's do a little bit of a dry run. We press play. The program runs this setup function first. It creates a canvas, gives it a color, it puts a text box in there, it creates a microphone, it creates a recorder, it creates a sound file, it creates a button, it puts the button up, near the top left. Then it tells the button that when the button is pressed, it runs the function start record. So let's imagine I click it, I click the button, it'll run the function start record, recorder.record sound file, which means it'll start recording and it'll put all the data inside the start file for us. Now, I'm going to click play, but I'm not going to press that button. And the reason I'm not going to press that button is, well, we haven't got a stop record yet. And if I click start recording, it would start recording and never stop recording. And very soon it'd fill up your entire computer's hard drive. And that's messy. We don't want that. So I'm going to click stop. And before I do anything else, I'm going to create the button that stops recording. Now, I'm lazy, so I think, what's that I can hear? Oh yeah, that's the sound of copy and paste. I'm just going to copy my entire start button code, all 3 lines. Copy. No, wrong button. Paste. Here I'm going to replace every instance of the word start with stop. And that's just for me being lazy. If I were even lazier, I could probably do a find replace option. Stop. And change that to stop. What else should I change? I should probably also change the position, because if I don't change the position, it'll just create the same button, create the new button directly on top of the old one, which is a pain to say the least. So let's make it move along horizontally. Let's go 160. See if that works better. Righto. I've got a stop button, and it's when the mouse is pressed, it'll run stop record, which we've already written. You can imagine what's coming up next. I'm going to employ the wondrous superpowers of copy and paste, and now do one for a play button. This play button is going to play back our recording. And I'm just going to delete every instance of start and change it to be play. 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 Oh, and of course, we're also going to have to move this even further towards the right. So let's move its X position. Let's make that, just guessing, 280. I'll pause a moment for anyone who wants to double check on that. Make sure you've got all the semicolons you need, all the brackets you need, and that kind of thing. Yeah, that should be fine. Let's click play. It was a little bit ugly in terms of they're not evenly spaced, but this is just a test program. It's not, I'm not going to try and sell this. I'm not going to put it up on the Apple Store or anything like that. It's close enough. It's just a prototype. But yeah, we have the 3 buttons. They all work. Oh, go on then. I'll move that just because I can. Oh, that's worse now. I wish I wasn't such a perfectionist. Close enough. It doesn't matter. So, we have our 3 buttons. And we're going to get round to testing these now. I have noticed, it wasn't happening yesterday, but it has happened today. I have noticed a small error with the P5 editor, in that sometimes it throws a wobbly. And it has a little error, and it says, can't do this. I don't know what causes that error, but I have found that if you copy your code, you close down the browser, and you open the browser again, it tends to work. I've only come across it a couple of times, but it's worthwhile noting that if this doesn't work, save your code. Basically, have you tried turning it off and on again? The classic solution. But let's see, fingers crossed. Let's click start recording, and I'm going to say something like, this is me speaking now. I'm going to click stop recording, and hope this works. I'm going to play recording. Bums. Oh, piddle. It's not worked. This is the error I was talking about. This was working fine yesterday. Righto. Okay, good to know. So, to fix this, I'm going to copy all of my code, close that, leave page, editor.p5js.org, make it dark, because that's fancy, press the wrong button, paste, and fingers crossed, let's hope this works now. I'm recording. You can hear me recording, I hope. Let's click play. Oh, crumbs. Okay. Yeah. This is an odd one because it was working perfectly all day yesterday when I was programming this. And only today has this error started turning up. I wonder what's going on. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to forge ahead and show you the code for creating the audio effects that we were going to create, but I just won't be able to demonstrate for them. So I see someone on YouTube has said that it works for them. That's enough for me. As long as it works for someone, I'm happy. But I'm going to go ahead and show you the code. I just won't be able to demonstrate it. Anyway, so I said at the start we're going to do some audio effects. And all the audio effects we are going to create are going to be written inside the play record function. And this function, well, it's playing the sound file, but there's nothing stopping us from editing the sound file before we play it. And the easiest one we can do is, before we play the sound file, we could tell it, just give myself some space, we can tell it to speed itself up, or slow itself down, or do all sorts of weird stuff. So sound file, or, yep, there we are, sound file. If I want it to play faster, I could say sound file dot rate. And the rate refers to the rate at which it plays back, not, review rating. It's not 5 stars out of 10. So soundfile.rate, open bracket, and here I'm going to put a number, and that number is the speed times speed it is sped up. So like in YouTube, when you go to the settings cog in YouTube and you change the playback speed, you can choose between 0.25, 0.5, 1, 1.25, 1.5, 1.75, or 2. So 2 is 2 times speed. Let's do that. Rate, soundfile.rate 2, semicolon. And that will play back your voice 2 times the speed that it normally sounds. I'm sure this won't work, but I'm going to keep on trying. It might just suddenly work all of a sudden. So, recording test doesn't work, but if you could hear that, if it worked for you, you'd be hearing a high-pitched, very sped up, chipmunk-like recording test. So we can speed it up with dot rate. We can slow it down if we use a number between 0 and 1. So if I wanted it to play at half speed, I could do it at 0.5. And if it were working, you could hear it. It would play back very slowly. If you played, I haven't tried it. You could try it. It's a fun experiment. I've not tried it at all, so I don't know what would happen. What happens if you played it back at 0? Oh, someone's got a... Oh, I think you've got a typo, Jack. You've written in chat, sound fine. You might just need to replace the N with an L. Anyway, so we can change the rate. We could do it slower or faster. Slower is 0 to 1. Faster is 1 to 2. You could go beyond 2, but at that point, it gets so fast that you can't really hear what's said. So we've got soundfile.rate. Now, I'm going to not delete this because it's useful code. I'm going to comment it out, just so that I still have the code written, but it's not actually running. It's not actually doing anything, because comments are ignored. Now in JavaScript, a comment starts with 2 forward slashes. So // this is a comment. It does not get executed. I'm going to do this for the sound file .rate2. I'm just going to put 2 slashes in front of it, which means the code's still there, but it doesn't run. So if I were to play now, it would play completely normally because this line is getting ignored. Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Every line with a // in front of it gets ignored. So we've sped it up. What happens if we want to turn it up? We can actually make it louder. You can say sound file dot amp. Now amp is short for amplify, and in the open bracket we can put in a number. Now I must warn you, this gets loud. Start with a very small number and move it up only slightly. I am not responsible if you damage your hearing. Okay, especially if you're wearing headphones. So let's say amp 2. So that will increase the loudness. Oh, I forgot the semicolon. That will increase the loudness of our sound file. So that's another fun one. So yeah, experiment with the numbers in that. You could turn something up, turn something down. Yeah, and that kind of thing. The last of the simple edits we're going to make is we're going to play in reverse. And to do that, we're going to say sound file dot reverse. And fortunately, we can't do it like that. That's a little bit just too cheeky. We need to reverse the buffer, which has a capital B. So reverse buffer, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. And when you play it back, you'll hear what is said in reverse. Now, what's interesting is if I were to play, obviously it's not playing for me, but if I were to play in reverse, it would play and I'd hear it reversed. But if I press it again, it would sound the same way again, back the right way around. And that's because what happens if you reverse something that's reversed? It goes back to normal. So this affects sound file, but it will keep on reversing it however many times you press play. Just a little interesting thing there. At least I found it as interesting. Shows you how fun I am. Okay, so we've done the nice simple edits. Now it's time to start getting creative. Let's have a little bit of fun. Now, for these ones, we're going to need a couple of extra things. The first one I want to show you is the distortion. The distortion library. So, to import distortion, we're going to go up to the very top again. Do you want that global or not? That seemed to be... Yeah, let's make it global just to be careful. Okay, so in our very first line, we've got the mic, we've got the recorder and the sound file. We also want the kind of machine, the thing, the factory that distorts things for us. So in this top line, let mic, recorder, sound file, I'm going to put a comma before the semicolon, and I'm going to have in there something called distort. And just like everything that's up here in this line, I'm going to need to add something down here in the setup function that will that will tell JavaScript what on earth this object is. So I'm going to say inside setup now, distort is equals a new object from P5, so P5 dot distortion. I had to double check how to spell it then. With a capital D, an open bracket, a close bracket, and a semicolon. Now, distortion basically is an audio effect where the sound is amplified so much that it kind of blows out the speakers, and they record the blown out speakers, and then they bring the volume back down so it doesn't blow out your ears as well. And it creates a very unusual sound. It's not altogether that pleasant. So there's a warning here now. If you're trying this and you decide to distort your sound file, that it will sound absolutely horrible. So be careful with that. So I've written up in setup distort equals new p5 dot distortion, and that means I can now use it down in my play record function. So to do that, we can do distort dot process, because this needs to process the sound file. It needs to do some computation on the sound file. Process, open bracket. Now we tell it what we're going to process. We're going to process the sound file and follow that with a comma. Then we're going to put in two numbers, and the two numbers describe how much it's distorted. And I want you to promise me that you're going to try with small numbers first before trying any large numbers, because you will hurt your ears. So small number, let's do 0.01, comma, and I'm going to give this one a 0. And at the end, I'll show you what all these numbers mean, or how to find out what these numbers mean. But this is just a nice small test for now. Distort.process, and we're going to process the sound file, and we're going to distort it at 0.01, and we're going to do, I think this one's overdrive. We're going to do 0 overdrive. And when you click play, it would be something horrific. And now, if it were working for me, it'd play something horrific. Really horrible. But it's there. I'm going to comment that one out again, because there's two more I want to show you. Okay. So the next one is reverb. And reverb is an audio effect where it makes something sound as if it's playing in a large cave or a cathedral or a small room. That's basically how that's processed. And just like distortion, I'm going to go back to the very top, and I'm going to put comma reverb, R-E-V-E-R-B at the top. And we also need to declare it as an object inside setup. So inside setup, I'm going to say reverb equals new p5 dot, and get this, so imaginative, reverb with a capital R. And of course, as per usual, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. I think that's going to be the name of my first child. Anyway, yeah. Play record is where we can actually work with that. So we had reverb equals new p5.reverb. Down here I can do reverb dot process, just like we did with distort. And I'm going to open a bracket and I'm going to tell it to process sound file. I'm going to follow it with a comma and then some numbers to represent how much. So let's say 0.5, just because, comma, 0.7, close bracket, end it with a semicolon, and yeah, that should be enough. Hopefully, yeah. And when you play that back, depending on what you tweak these numbers to be, it will sound as if you're in a different size room. So it could sound very muffled, it could sound very echoey, that kind of stuff. So, speaking of echo, that brings us on to our very last effect of today. Now, I've just commented out reverb because we're not going to stack them just yet. What else can we do? Well, if we follow that with a comma at the top, we've imported distort, we've imported reverb. The last one we're going to use is called delay. D-E-L-A-Y. And delay basically adds an echo onto your voice. It's not really... I don't know why they don't call it echo. It's weird, that. But basically it takes what you said and it repeats it and repeats it and repeats it, but it gets quieter each time it repeats. And just like distort and reverb, we need to go into setup and we need to tell it it's an object. So delay equals new p5 dot delay with a capital D, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. And if we go back down to play record, we can actually process our sound file with a bit of delay. So delay dot process sound file. Can type them for a second. We're going to give it some numbers. So let's say 0.5, 0.6, and this requires a third number. And I'll show you how to find out what these numbers mean in a bit, but let's just stick in 2,300. So this one requires 3 numbers, so it's different to distort and reverb. But I'm going to stick those in and finish that with a semicolon. And when you play that back, it should sound all sorts of echoey. And I would love to show you, but sadly it's bugged out on mine. But, kind of annoying. I'll see if I can sort something out on the website so you can have a go of this and see what effects happen. Anyway, that pretty much completes it for today. Do tell me through the website or chat or whatever if you like processing. I've just discovered this P5 editor and I love processing, so I'm very tempted to do more with it. It can do lots of stuff with video, lots of stuff with images, lots of stuff with 3D, lighting effects, all sorts, but it's up to you. You can actually see some of the things. If you go to File, you can also save or download your code so far. If I go to File and Examples, yeah, I'm going to right-click and open that in a new tab. I don't want to delete all my code. You can actually see some stuff they have put together as an example. So we've got shapes, we've got Oh, these ones are interesting. Amplitude modulation. As you move your mouse, it changes the amplitude modulation of this sine wave. If I go back, and there's things like frequency modulation. See, this is where we get reverb and delay. You can also apply filters like band pass and low pass. Filters basically take out the bass or the treble in your voice. So if you've got a quite bassy voice, then you can make it sound, quite thin, or vice versa. If you've got a bassy voice like the people who do movie trailers, that kind of stuff. There's lots of stuff you can do, lots of sound synthesis with this. I might get a little into that because I am very fond of synthesizers. There's lots of stuff with 3D. I'll even do raycasting. We'll do raycasting. Okay, that's cool. That's very cool. Oh, sorry, I'm nerding out over this. Yeah, there's all sorts. Processing's a massive library, and it does lots of very interesting things. And yeah, it's great fun to explore. If you want to see what the numbers represent in the reverb, distort, and the other one, you can go to, where is it? Help and reference from the P5 editor. And it'll open up the reference. And this tells you what all the functions do in P5 in processing. But if you want to look at sound functions, you can click this one here at the top, which says p5.sound. And there we are. We see all the things that we've worked with today, like sound file. Oscillator is for making synthesizers. Delay, filter, reverb. Convolver. What's convolver? Never seen that one. If we look at delay, it gives you an example of how to use delay. It also tells you what all the... If you scroll down, you can find methods, where you can find the process bit. Remember we did delay.process. And this tells you what each of the numbers mean. So when you do process, we did as with sound file, comma, the delay time, the time in seconds of the delay, the feedback, so it sends the delay back through itself in a loop, and then low pass, which is the cutoff frequency. And that's the same if we go back and look for distort. There's distortion. We can scroll down, we can find process, and we can scroll down, and it's only had two values for process. It had the amount of distortion, and then it had a number for oversampling. So none, 2 times oversampling, or 4 times oversampling. Which, when you're getting into oversampling with distortion, you're going to be making some interesting sounds. And finally, for reverb, you can scroll down and go to process. And yeah, here we had process. This was our sound file. The number of the duration of the reverb, how much the reverb decays, and you can send it a true or a false, whether you want it to be backwards or forwards. Anyway, that's a little bit on processing. This is processing for JavaScript, which is known as p5.js. It's got an editor attached, which we've used today. You can also find processing for Python. We've used that before. Process for Android, Processify. It's a lovely library, and I'm not going to lie, a little bit obsessed with it. So I'll try not to do too much on it. In any case, I hope you have a wonderful evening, and goodbye.